Sometimes inheritance arrives exactly when you've lost everything else. Maya Hartwell was 7 months pregnant, sleeping in her car at a rest stop outside Boone, North Carolina, when the certified letter found her. The return address meant nothing. A law firm in Asheville she'd never heard of. But inside was a single sentence that would change everything. You are the sole heir to the Hartwell homestead, occupied last in 1885, located at Raven's Gap in the Blue Ridge Mountains. She read it 3 times in the dim dome light of her Honda, her hand resting on the swell of her belly where the baby, a girl, they'd told her at the clinic, kicked restlessly against her ribs. An inheritance, a cabin, a place that had been waiting 139 years for someone to claim it. Maya was 32 years old and had exactly $247 to her name. 3 months ago, she'd had a husband, a rented duplex in Charlotte, and a nursery half-painted in soft yellow. Then David left, not because of the pregnancy. He wanted the baby, or said he did, but because of the woman from his office. Someone younger, someone who didn't have stretch marks and swollen ankles, someone who laughed at his jokes the way Maya had stopped doing somewhere in the middle of their 6-year marriage. The divorce papers arrived the same week. She lost her job. Budget cuts, they said. Last hired, first fired. The duplex went next. She couldn't make rent on unemployment. Her parents were dead, gone in a car accident when she was 19. No siblings. No close friends willing to take in a pregnant woman with nowhere to go. So she'd been living in her car for 2 weeks, parking at rest stops, washing up in gas station bathrooms, eating whatever she could afford from dollar menus. The baby moved constantly now, as if sensing her mother's fear, as if trying to say, "We'll be okay, we'll be okay, we'll be okay." But Maya didn't know if they would be. The letter from the lawyer gave an address and a phone number. She called at 8 the next morning from the rest stop payphone, feeding in quarters with shaking hands. Merritt and Associates. A woman answered. I received a letter about an inheritance. The Hartwell homestead. One moment, please. Classical music played. Maya watched semis rumble past on I-40, felt the November wind cut through her thin jacket. Finally, a man's voice, smooth and professional. Miss Hartwell? This is Gerald Merritt. Thank you for calling. I've been trying to locate you for several months. I've been moving around. She didn't explain why. I understand. Let me get straight to the point. Your great-great-great-grandfather, Ezra Hartwell, built a cabin in Raven's Gap in 1882. The property has passed through the family line, according to very specific instructions in the original deed. You are the last living Hartwell. The property is yours. Maya's throat tightened. What kind of condition is it in? A pause. I haven't personally visited the site, Miss Hartwell. The property is quite remote, accessible only by a logging road and then on foot. But according to county records, the structure is still standing. Whether it's habitable, he trailed off diplomatically. Is there anything owed on it? Taxes? Liens? Nothing. The property taxes have been paid from a trust established by Ezra Hartwell in 1885. The trust has sufficient funds to continue paying taxes in perpetuity. The land is yours, free and clear. Maya closed her eyes. Free and clear. A place no one could take from her. When can I see it? I can meet you at my office tomorrow to transfer the deed. After that, the property is yours to visit whenever you'd like. I should warn you, Miss Hartwell, Raven's Gap is extremely isolated. There's no electricity, no running water, no cell service. If you're thinking of actually living there, I am, Maya said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Then I'd strongly suggest visiting first. See what you're dealing with before making any decisions. She agreed to meet him the next day. When she hung up, her hands were shaking, but not from cold anymore, from something else. Something that felt almost like hope. Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story is touching you already, make sure you're subscribed. I've got something extra special saved for tomorrow. The drive to Asheville took 3 hours. Maya's Honda sputtering cough on the mountain grades, the check engine light glowing amber on the dashboard. She'd been ignoring it for weeks. couldn't afford repairs, could barely afford gas. But the car held together, climbing switchback roads into the Blue Ridge Mountains as the elevation increased, and the air turned sharp with the scent of pine and approaching winter. Merritt's office was in a renovated Victorian downtown. Inside smelled like old paper and furniture polish. The lawyer himself was older than his voice suggested, maybe 70, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He spread documents across his mahogany desk. Deed transfers, property surveys, a hand-drawn map that looked older than the United States itself. The Hartwell homestead consists of 42 acres, Merritt explained, pointing to the survey. The cabin sits here, roughly 2 miles from the nearest logging road. Your great-great-great-grandfather was particular about privacy. Why did he leave it? Maya asked, why has it been empty since 1885? Merritt adjusted his glasses. That's unclear from the records. Ezra Hartwell built the cabin in 1882, lived there for 3 years, then disappeared. Some local records suggest he went west. Gold rush speculation. Others say he simply walked into the mountains one day and never returned. What's clear is that he left very specific instructions. The property must pass to the eldest Hartwell heir in each generation. It cannot be sold, cannot be subdivided, cannot be transferred outside the family line. And if there are no Hartwells left, then it reverts to the state. But you exist, Miss Hartwell, so the cabin is yours. He pushed the deed across the desk. Maya stared at her name written in formal script. Maya Elizabeth Hartwell. Below it, a line stretching back through generations. Her father's name. His father's. Name she barely knew. And at the top, in faded ink, Ezra Hartwell, 1882. There's one more thing. Merritt opened a drawer and pulled out an envelope, yellowed and sealed with red wax. This was left with the original deed. Instructions state it should be given to whoever claims the property. The envelope was addressed in careful, old-fashioned handwriting, to the Hartwell who returns. Maya turned it over in her hands. The wax seal bore the impression of a tree, roots spreading as wide as branches. Aren't you going to open it? Merritt asked. Not yet. She didn't know why, but something told her to wait, to see the cabin first, to understand what she'd inherited before reading words written 139 years ago. She signed the papers. Merritt gave her the keys, 2 of them iron heavy, old enough to be museum pieces, and a hand-drawn map. He also gave her his card and a warning. Miss Hartwell, I feel obligated to say this. That cabin has been abandoned for over a century. Even if the structure is sound, living there, especially in your condition, he glanced at her. Belly, it would be extremely difficult. There are social services available. Programs that could help you find proper housing. I don't need programs, Maya said quietly. I need a home. This is mine. It's the only thing that is. Merritt nodded slowly. Then I wish you the very best of luck. Section 2. The catalyst, inciting incident. Maya drove north from Asheville into wilderness. The map showed a turnoff from Highway 221, then a logging road marked with an X. She found it 20 miles past the last gas station, a narrow track disappearing into dense forest, blocked by a rusted chain with a faded private property sign. The keys Merritt had given her fit the padlock. It took both hands and all her strength to force the corroded mechanism open. The chain fell away with a heavy clank that echoed through the trees. The logging road was worse than she'd imagined. Rutted, overgrown, barely wide enough for her Honda. Branches scraped the sides. Twice she had to stop and clear fallen limbs. The car bottomed out on rocks, the undercarriage screaming. But she kept going. First gear, crawling forward while the baby kicked protests against her bladder. After 2 miles, the road simply ended. A wall of mountain laurel and rhododendron, impenetrable to vehicles. Maya cut the engine and sat in sudden silence, broken only by wind in the trees and the tick of cooling metal. According to the map, the cabin was another 1.5 miles northeast, following what Ezra Hartwell had marked as the old trace. Maya gathered what she could carry. Her backpack with clothes, the envelope from Merritt, a flashlight, the water bottle she'd filled at Creek Crossing. She locked the car, habit, though there was no one within miles, and started walking. The trace was invisible at first. Then her eyes adjusted and she saw it. A slight depression in the forest floor where feet had once traveled regularly. The path climbed steadily, winding between massive oaks and hemlocks that blocked most of the afternoon sun. The air grew colder. Maya's breath plumed white. Her back ached. Her ankles were swollen. The baby sat heavy and low, making every step an effort. But she kept moving, one foot in front of the other, because somewhere ahead was shelter. Somewhere ahead was home. After 40 minutes, the forest changed. The trees grew larger, older, their trunks wrapped in moss. The understory thinned. And then, through the bare November branches, she saw it. The cabin sat in a small clearing on a slight rise, built from hand-hewn logs dark with age. The structure was larger than she'd expected. 2 stories, with a stone chimney rising from one end and a covered porch spanning the front. The roof was intact, though missing shingles in places. The windows were shuttered from the inside. The whole building had a waiting quality, as if it had been holding its breath for 139 years. Maya approached slowly, her heart hammering. Dead leaves covered the porch steps. The railing was solid when she tested it, the wood weathered but sound. The front door was oak, thick as her forearm, fitted with an iron latch and a keyhole beneath. The second key fit perfectly. The lock turned with a deep, satisfying click. Maya pushed the door open. Hinges groaned, and she stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Dust, old wood, the mineral scent of stone, and beneath it all something else. Preserved air, like opening a jar sealed generations ago. The interior was dark, the shuttered windows admitting only thin lines of light. Maya pulled out her flashlight and swept the beam across the space. One large room dominated the first floor. A stone fireplace at the far end blackened with use. A wooden table with 4 chairs, all still standing. Shelves along one wall holding dusty jars and tin containers. A dry sink with a basin. A rocking chair positioned to face both the door and the hearth. Everything was covered in thick dust, but nothing looked disturbed. No animal nests, no signs of weather damage despite the missing roof shingles. It was as if Ezra Hartwell had simply walked out one morning in 1885, and the house had frozen in that moment, waiting. Maya moved deeper into space, her flashlight revealing details. A kerosene lamp on the table, its glass chimney still intact. A cast-iron skillet hanging from a hook near the hearth. A hand-braided rug, now gray with dust, but showing hints of color beneath, red, blue, green. Against the far wall, a ladder led to a loft above. Maya tested the first rung carefully. Solid. She climbed slowly, awkward with her belly. One hand on the ladder, the other holding the flashlight. The loft was smaller than the main room, with a sloped ceiling following the roofline. A simple bed frame held a tick mattress that had long ago given up its shape. A trunk sat at the foot of the bed, and in the far corner, barely visible in the flashlight beam, was a narrow door. Maya crossed the loft, floorboards creaking under her weight. The door was small. She'd have to duck to go through it. The wood was different from the rest of the cabin, rougher, as if added later. There was no latch, just a simple leather loop. She pulled the loop. The door swung inward, revealing darkness and the smell of old paper. The attic. Maya had to crouch to enter. The space was tiny, maybe 6 feet by 8, with a ceiling so low she couldn't stand upright. Her flashlight beam found rough rafters, exposed stone from the chimney, and against the far wall, stacks of boxes and crates. She moved closer, her pulse quickening. The boxes were wooden handmade, fitted together with careful joints. Some had words burned into sides. Books. Records. Personal. Maya opened the nearest box labeled personal. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were bundles of letters tied with string. She lifted one bundle carefully, untied the string, and unfolded the top letter. The paper was fragile, the ink faded brown, but the handwriting was clear, strong, deliberate. My dear Sarah, I write this knowing you may never read it. The journey west grows more difficult each day. The others speak of turning back, but I cannot. Not until I find what I seek. Not until I prove the surveyors wrong. The land, they say, is worthless, Our land, Sarah, 42 acres we bought with everything we had, sits atop something they missed. I've seen the signs. The water runs different here. The rocks show traces. There's gold in these mountains, and it runs beneath our property. I will find it. I will bring you home to a cabin worthy of our family. I will make this right. Your devoted husband, Ezra. Maya's hands trembled. She set the letter aside and reached for another bundle. More letters, all to Sarah. Some spoke of Ezra's search for gold, his growing obsession. Others were tender, describing the cabin he was building, the life he imagined they'd have. Then the tone changed. A letter dated September 1885. Sarah, the gold is real. I found the vein, not on our property, but on the adjacent claim, the Morrison Tract. It runs deep, possibly the richest strike in these mountains. But Morrison discovered me surveying. He's threatened to have me arrested for trespassing, for claim jumping. He says he'll see me hanged if I set foot on his land again. I've done something I'm not proud of. I've made a deal with Morrison. He needs lumber for his mining operation. I've agreed to harvest timber from our property and sell it to him at a loss, nearly giving away, in exchange for his silence about my trespassing. It galls me to help the man sitting atop our fortune, but I have no choice. The law would side with him. I'd lose everything, including my freedom. This isn't over, Sarah. I will find a way. Maya opened box after box. The letters continued to the fall of 1885, each one darker than the last. Ezra's deal with Morrison had bankrupted him. The timber on the Hartwell property was stripped. The gold vein on Morrison's land proved even larger than expected. Morrison became wealthy while Ezra sank into despair. The final letter was dated December 15th, 1885. My beloved Sarah, I have failed you, failed our children, failed the family name. Morrison has made his fortune. The mine produces more gold each month than I'll see in a lifetime. And I am the fool who sold him the timber to build it, who clear my own land to make him rich while I have nothing. But I've learned something. Morrison's mine won't last forever. The geologists say 20 years, perhaps 30. Then the gold will be gone and the mine will close. When that happens, Morrison's heirs will abandon the claim. Mining law states that abandoned claims can be restaked after 10 years of inactivity. I've done the mathematics. Sarah, 30 years of mining, plus 10 years of abandonment. 40 years from now, that land will be available again, and the gold won't all be gone. The veins run deeper than Morrison's equipment can reach. Future technology will make it possible to extract what he leaves behind. I'm writing this in 1885. In 1925, Morrison's mine will close. In 1935, it can be reclaimed. Our grandchildren, Sarah, or their children, someone from our family can return and claim what should have been ours. I'm sealing these letters in the attic. I'm including all the survey maps, all the geological reports I secretly commissioned, all the proof of what lies beneath Morrison's land. I'm also including something else. Insurance. I will not see this fortune, but a Hartwell will. The cabin will wait. The truth will wait. This is my last letter. Tomorrow I head west one final time, not seeking gold, but seeking distance from this failure. Forgive me for what I couldn't give you in life, but know that I've left our descendants something more valuable than gold, the knowledge of where it lies and the legal path to claim it. Forever yours. Ezra. Maya's vision blurred. She wiped her eyes and reached for the next box. Inside were maps, dozens of them. Survey maps showing property boundaries. Geological maps with veins marked in red ink. Mining claims with dates and signatures. She found the Morrison claim, a sprawling 200 acres adjacent to Hartwell property. And beneath the maps, she found the insurance Ezra had mentioned. A leather-bound journal, its pages filled with detailed records. Dates, times, observations. Ezra had watched Morrison's mine for months before he left. He documented everything, how much was extracted, how many workers were employed, how the operation functioned. And he discovered something Morrison had been hiding. The mine wasn't just on Morrison's claimed land. The main shaft started there, but the veins ran underneath the property line, underneath Hartwell land. Morrison had been secretly extracting gold from beneath Ezra's 42 acres for years. It was theft. Clear, documented theft. The final entry in Ezra's journal was dated December 20th, 1885. Morrison thinks he's won, but I've documented everything. The theft from my land, the illegal extraction, the fraud. Statute of limitations means nothing when theft is ongoing. His mine has been stealing from my property for years. When a Hartwell returns when they find this evidence, they can file claim to everything Morrison extracted illegally, plus damages. The lawyers I consulted estimate it would be worth millions in future dollars. Let Morrison's heirs think they're safe. Let them believe the Hartwell claim is worthless. The truth waits in this attic. Whoever finds this, know that justice delayed is not justice denied. This is your inheritance. Use it wisely. Maya sat back on her heels, her mind reeling. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing her mother's shock. The cabin wasn't the inheritance. The 42 acres of stripped timber land weren't the inheritance. The real inheritance was this: documented proof that one of the richest gold mines in North Carolina history had been built on theft, that millions of dollars in gold had been extracted from Hartwell land illegally, that the Morrison family had built their fortune on fraud, and that fortune still existed. Somewhere in some form it could be claimed. Maya's hand shook as she gathered the documents. Letters, maps, journal, geological surveys, 139 years of evidence carefully preserved. She carried them down from the attic, down the loft ladder, and spread them across the dusty table in the main room. The afternoon light slanting through cracks in the shutters turned the dust motes into gold particles floating in the air. Maya stood in the center of the cabin, her cabin, and understood what Ezra Hartwell had done. He left his descendants a weapon, a case so thoroughly documented that no amount of time could erase it, proof that would stand up in any court, in any era. The question was, what would she do with it? Outside, the November wind picked up, rattling the shutters. The baby moved restlessly. Maya's stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since the gas station that morning. But none of that mattered right now. Right now. She stood in a cabin abandoned for 139 years, holding proof that she, homeless, broke, 7 months pregnant, was the rightful heir to a fortune stolen from her family. Everything was about to change. She just had to figure out how. Section 3. The first reveal mystery deepens. Maya spent the first night in the cabin. She had no choice. By the time she finished reading through the attic documents, darkness had fallen completely. Walking back to her car on the rough trail while pregnant and exhausted would have been dangerous, possibly fatal. She cleared dust from the rocking chair and sat, wrapped in her jacket, as the temperature dropped. The cabin was cold, but solid. The walls blocked the wind. The roof, despite missing shingles, didn't leak that she could tell. Outside, branches creaked. Something, a deer maybe or a raccoon, rustled through the underbrush near the clearing. Maya pulled out the sealed envelope Merritt had given her, the one addressed to the Hartwell who returns. In the beam of her flashlight, she broke the wax seal and unfolded the single sheet inside. The handwriting was the same as the letters. Ezra's hand, strong and certain. If you're reading this, you've found the attic. You know about Morrison. You know about the gold. What you may not know is why I left instead of fighting. Sarah died in 1884, 6 months before I found the gold vein. Consumption took her. Our children, 3 sons, died in the same epidemic. I buried them in Asheville before I came to these mountains. I built this cabin for ghosts, for a family that no longer existed. And when I discovered Morrison's theft, I had no one to fight for, no reason to stay. But I knew the Hartwell line wouldn't end with me. Somewhere, a cousin's child or a nephew's grandchild would continue the name. Someone would eventually inherit this land. I wanted that person, to have what I couldn't give my own family. Not just gold, but justice. The Morrison family built their wealth on our loss. Let their descendants learn what it means to have something taken. The evidence is thorough. The case is winnable. But I'll warn you, the Morrisons are powerful. When you come forward, they will fight. They will try to bury this. To bury you, you must be stronger than I was. You must fight when I ran. The cabin is yours. The land is yours. And the truth is yours to wield. Use it well. Ezra Hartwell, December 1885. Maya folded the letter carefully. She sat in the darkness, one hand on her belly, feeling her daughter move beneath her palm. Ezra had built this cabin in grief, had filled it with everything he had left: hope, evidence, the dream of eventual justice, then walked away because he had no one to fight for. But Maya had someone. She had the baby, 7 months grown, moving and kicking and completely dependent on her for everything. She had someone to fight for. As if responding to her thoughts, the baby kicked hard. Once, twice, 3 times against her ribs. Maya smiled despite everything. "Okay," she whispered. Message received. She dozed fitfully in the rocking chair, wrapped in her jacket, waking every hour to cold and darkness and the unfamiliar sounds of the mountain night. By dawn, she was stiff, hungry, and more determined than she'd ever been in her life. In the thin morning light, she explored the cabin more thoroughly. The main room was larger than it had seemed in darkness, maybe 20 by 25 feet. The loft above added another bedroom space. A root cellar beneath the floor, access through a trapdoor near the dry sink, was carved straight into bedrock. Maya climbed down into the cellar, her flashlight revealing a small, cool space, empty except for a few broken jars, and, in the far corner, something that made her breath catch: a cradle, hand-carved from walnut, the wood still smooth and beautiful despite 139 years of abandonment. It had been made with extraordinary care, each spindle precisely turned, the rockers perfectly balanced, every joint fitted with the attention of someone making something precious. Ezra had carved this, had made it for a child who died before they could use it. Maya ran her fingers over the wood. The baby kicked, and she imagined Ezra alone in this cabin, carving by lamplight, building something beautiful for a family that was already gone. "I'll use it," she promised the empty cellar. "Your great-great-great-great-granddaughter will sleep in this cradle." She climbed back to the main room. Her stomach demanded attention. She'd eaten nothing since yesterday morning. The hike back to her car would take at least an hour. She needed to get supplies, food, water, something to make this cabin habitable for more than one night. But as she gathered the document from the attic, preparing to take them with her, a sound stopped her cold. Voices, distant but getting closer. Men's voices, multiple, coming up the trace from the direction of her car. Maya's pulse spiked. She moved to the window, peering through gaps in the shutters. 4 men emerged from the tree line into the clearing. They wore hunting vests and boots, carried rifles. One consulted a GPS device. "This is it," he called to the others. "The Hartwell claim. Been abandoned so long. County says it's open season for hunting leases." Maya's chest tightened. She hadn't thought about hunters. The property had been empty for 139 years. Of course people assumed they could use it. The men approached the cabin. One tried the door, still locked from the inside where Maya had latched it after entering yesterday. "Someone's been here," he said, suspicious. "Lock's been opened recently." "Probably vagrants," another said. "We'll run him off. Could be dangerous. Could be cooking meth up here. Nobody to see." One of them shouldered his rifle. "Let's check it out." Maya's mind raced. She was alone, pregnant, with no phone service and no way to call for help. These men thought the property was abandoned, thought they had every right to be here. She could hide in the attic, but they'd search the cabin. They'd find her eventually. Or she could open the door and claim what was hers. The baby kicked once, hard. Maya took a breath, unlatched the door, and stepped onto the porch. The 4 men froze, startled. "This is private property," Maya said, her voice carrying across the clearing with more authority than she felt. "You're trespassing." The nearest man, maybe 50, graying beard, expensive hunting gear, recovered first. "No disrespect, miss, but this land's been abandoned since before my granddaddy was born. Nobody's claimed it in over a century. I'm claiming it now. I'm Maya Hartwell. This property belongs to me. The deed transferred 3 days ago." The men exchanged glances. The one with the GPS spoke up. County records show this as unclaimed wilderness, open for hunting leases. County records are wrong. I have the deed. I have the keys. And I'm telling you to leave. The first man's expression hardened. You can't just show up and kick people off land that's been open for generations. I can and I am. This is Hartwell property. It's always been Hartwell property. You've been using it illegally. Lady, you're making a mistake. There are people in this county who've had hunting leases here for 50 years. People with influence. You don't want to make enemies. Maya's hands clenched, but she kept her voice steady. I don't want enemies. I want you off my land. The standoff stretched. The men clearly weren't used to being challenged, especially not by a pregnant woman alone on a mountain. But Maya had spent 2 weeks sleeping in her car, had lost everything, had nothing left to lose. I'm going to count to 10, she said quietly. Then I'm calling the sheriff. She held up her phone, knowing full well there was no signal. Gambling, they wouldn't know that. The men muttered among themselves. Finally, the leader shrugged. Fine, we'll go, but you better have that deed registered, or you'll be hearing from our lawyers. They turned and headed back down the trace. Maya watched until they disappeared into the trees. Then her legs gave out. She sat hard on the porch step, shaking. She'd won this confrontation, but the man's words echoed. People with influence. You don't want to make enemies. She'd been on this property less than 24 hours, and already people were challenging her right to be here. When she came forward with evidence about the Morrison mine, about the stolen gold, the fight would be 1,000 times worse. Maya pulled out the deed Merritt had given her. She needed to get it officially recorded at the county office, needed to establish her legal claim beyond any doubt before word spread that someone was challenging the Morrison fortune. She gathered what she could carry, the deed, the most important documents from the attic, her backpack, and locked the cabin behind her. The hike back to her car took an hour and a half, her pace slower now, exhausted and hungry. When she reached the Honda, she found a business card tucked under the wiper blade. Clayton Morrison 3. Morrison Mining and Development. Preserving Mountain Heritage since 1885. On the back, handwritten, "We should talk." Maya's blood went cold. The hunters must have called him. Or maybe the Morrisons had been monitoring the county deed transfers, waiting to see if anyone would ever claim the Hartwell property. Either way, they already knew she existed. The fight Ezra had started 139 years ago was about to begin again, and this time, Maya would see it through to the end. Section 4. Pursuing the Truth investigation begins. Maya drove straight to the Watauga County Courthouse, the business card burning in her pocket like evidence of a threat. Her hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, knuckles white, as the Honda climbed switchbacks into Boone. The baby sat heavy and low, making every bump in the road send sharp pains through her pelvis. She ignored them. The courthouse was a brick building on King Street, imposing the way government buildings always are, designed to make you feel small. Maya parked in the visitor lot and gathered her documents, the deed, Ezra's letters, the survey maps. She left the geological reports and mining records locked in her trunk. Not yet. First, she needed to establish legal ownership beyond any doubt. Inside, the Registry of Deeds office smelled like old paper and floor polish. A woman behind the counter, maybe 60 with reading glasses on a chain, looked up when Maya approached. "Help you? I need to record a deed transfer." Maya slid the documents across the counter. The woman examined them, her expression shifting from routine boredom to sharp interest as she read the property description. The Hartwell homestead? In Raven's Gap? Yes. It transferred to me 3 days ago from a family trust. The woman's eyes flicked to Maya's belly, then back to papers. This property's been inactive since, my lord, since 1885? Yes, ma'am. And you're planning to actually claim it? Live there? Maya kept her voice level. I already am living there. I just need it officially recorded. The woman studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. Then she nodded and began processing the paperwork. This'll take about an hour. There's a fee, $75 for recording, plus research fees, since it's been so long since the last update. Maya's stomach dropped. She had $247 total. $75 was groceries for a week, gas money, the margin between survival and disaster. But she pulled out her worn wallet and counted out the bills. The woman took them, then hesitated. "Miss Hartwell, can I give you some advice? Off the record?" Maya nodded. The Morrison family owns half this county. Mining operations, real estate development, the timber company. They're good people mostly, do a lot for the community, but they're also used to getting what they want. She tapped the deed. If this property connects to anything they're interested in, they won't take kindly to complications. "Are you saying I shouldn't record my own deed?" "I'm saying be careful. Know what you're getting into before you make waves." Maya met her eyes. "I'm 7 months pregnant, living in a cabin with no electricity or running water. I've already lost everything I had. What more can they take?" The woman's expression softened. "Plenty, honey, but I can see you're not going to back down." She processed the payment and handed Maya a receipt. "Come back in an hour. Your deed will be official." Maya left and crossed the street to a coffee shop. She bought the cheapest thing on the menu, a small coffee, $1.50, and sat at a corner table with Ezra's letters and maps spread in front of her. She needed to understand exactly what she was claiming. The letters were clear about the theft. Morrison's mine had extracted gold from beneath Hartwell property for years, maybe decades. But how much gold? What was it worth? And more importantly, what could she actually recover 139 years later? She pulled out her phone. Still no service in the mountains, but here in town, she had full bars. She searched Morrison Mining Company, North Carolina history. The results were extensive. The Morrison mine had been one of the largest gold producers in North Carolina from 1885 to 1927. At its peak, it employed over 200 workers and extracted an estimated $15 million in gold, roughly $400 million in today's dollars when adjusted for inflation. The mine closed in 1927, just as Ezra had predicted. The easy gold was exhausted. The company shifted to timber and real estate development, maintaining wealth across generations. Maya searched deeper. Morrison Family, North Carolina Current. Clayton Morrison III appeared in dozens of results. He was CEO of Morrison Mining and Development, a company that had diversified far beyond its original gold mining roots. Current holdings included 3 shopping centers, a ski resort development, 2,000 acres of mountain property, and Maya's breath caught. Active permits for reopening gold mining operations using modern extraction techniques. She clicked on a news article from 6 months ago. Morrison Mining announces return to gold production. Boone, North Carolina. Morrison Mining and Development revealed plans to reopen historic gold mining operations in Watauga County using modern, environmentally friendly extraction methods. CEO Clayton Morrison III stated the company has been quietly acquiring adjacent properties around the original Morrison mine site for the past decade, assembling a contiguous claim that would make large-scale operations viable. Gold prices have reached levels that make previously unprofitable deposits worth extracting, Morrison said. New technology allows us to access deeper veins our ancestors couldn't reach. This represents hundreds of jobs and millions in economic development for the region. The project has faced opposition from environmental groups concerned about watershed contamination, but county commissioners have been broadly supportive given the economic benefits. Maya read it twice, her mind racing. The Morrisons weren't just sitting on old wealth. They were planning to mine again. And if they'd been quietly acquiring adjacent properties, that meant she pulled out the survey map Ezra had drawn. The Hartwell property sat directly adjacent to the original Morrison claim, 42 acres in the middle of what would be their new mining operation. Without her property, their project was incomplete. They'd need her land for access, for water rights, possibly for the mining itself if the veins ran the direction Ezra's geological maps suggested. The business card Clayton Morrison had left made sudden, terrible sense. We should talk. Not a threat. An opening negotiation. He thought she was just another property owner he could buy out. He had no idea she had evidence his family's entire fortune was built on theft. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Gerald Merritt. I want to check if you found a property suitable. Please let me know if you need any assistance with the transition. She texted back, found it, staying, recording the deed today. Thank you. His response came within seconds. Excellent. Please keep me informed of any developments. The trust that pays the property taxes also contains a small emergency fund, $5,000, available to property owner for essential repairs or legal fees. Let me know if you need access. Maya stared at the message. $5,000. Ezra's trust had been paying taxes for 139 years and still had money left over. Money she could use to fight the Morrisons, if it came to that. She typed, I may need that soon. We'll be in touch. When she returned to the courthouse, her deed was recorded and official. The woman behind the counter handed her the stamped documents with an expression that seemed almost sympathetic. It's official now, Miss Hartwell. The property is legally yours, recorded in public. She paused, which means everyone interested will know by tomorrow, including the Morrisons, especially the Morrisons. They monitor all deed transfers in the county, part of how they've assembled their holdings. Maya thanked her and left. In the parking lot, she sat in her car and called a number on Clayton Morrison's business card. He answered on the second ring. Clayton Morrison, this is Maya Hartwell. You left your card on my car. A pause, then warmth flooded his voice, professional, calculated warmth. Miss Hartwell, thank you for calling. I'm so glad we can talk. I understand you claimed the old Hartwell homestead. I have. The deed is recorded as of an hour ago. Wonderful. That property is quite a history. I'm sure you're aware it borders land my family has owned since the 1880s. I'm aware. Then you might also be aware we've been assembling adjacent properties for a development project. Your 42 acres sits right in the middle of our planned operation. I'd very much like to discuss purchasing it from you. I think you'd find our offer more than fair. Maya kept her voice neutral. I'm not interested in selling. Another pause, longer this time. Miss Hartwell, I understand attachment to family property, but that cabin has been abandoned for over a century. It's isolated, no utilities, no access to services. And from what I understand, forgive me for being forward, you're expecting a child. Is that really where you want to raise a baby? What I do with my property is my business, Mr. Morrison. Of course, I'm just trying to help. Our initial offer would be $200,000. Cash, quick closing. That would set you up quite comfortably. You could buy a proper house, set up a nursery, give your child. I said no. The warmth in his voice cooled slightly. May I ask why? Is it a matter of price? Because we have some flexibility. It's not about price. The property isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. Silence. When Morrison spoke again, the professional veneer had cracked. Miss Hartwell, I don't think you understand what you're turning down. That land is worthless except as part of our larger project. You can't develop it. You can't sell timber. It was stripped in the 1880s. You're sitting on 42 acres of rocky mountain ground with a collapsing cabin and no prospects. Then why do you want it so badly? Because it completes our claim. Without it, we have gaps in our operation. With it, we have a viable project that brings jobs and revenue to this county. Surely you can see the greater good. Maya felt the baby kick, a sharp jab against her ribs. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to be very clear. My great-great-great-grandfather built that cabin. He lived there, died there, and left it to his family with specific instructions it could never be sold. I'm honoring those wishes. The property stays in Hartwell hands. Miss Hartwell, we're done talking. Don't contact me again. She hung up, hands shaking. The baby moved restlessly, as if sensing her mother's adrenaline. Maya started the car and drove back toward Raven's Gap, her mind already working through what came next. Morrison had tipped his hand. He needed her property desperately enough to lead with a $200,000 offer and hint at flexibility higher. That meant the land was worth far more than he was saying. It meant she had leverage. But she also had evidence of something Morrison didn't know she knew, that his family's entire fortune was stolen from hers, that the mine that made them rich had been built on fraud. The question was when and how to use that weapon. She stopped at a grocery store in Boone, spent $30 on essentials, canned soup, crackers, bottled water, a cheap sleeping bag, since the cabin had no bedding. Then she drove back up into the mountains, back to the cabin that was slowly becoming home. Section 5. The Deeper Secret, Second Layer Revelation. Maya spent the next 3 days making the cabin habitable. She cleared decades of dust, swept floors, scrubbed the dry sink. Vernon Merritt, the lawyer, had mentioned the property trust had emergency funds. She called and arranged for $500 to be released for immediate repairs. With that money, she bought a camping stove and propane, a water filtration system for the creek that ran through the property, basic tools, weatherproofing supplies for the worst gaps in the roof, and a second-hand solar charging panel for her phone and flashlight. It wasn't much. The cabin still had no electricity, no plumbing, no heat except what she could generate from the fireplace. But it was shelter. It was hers. And every day she stayed was a day she wasn't sleeping in her car, wasn't vulnerable, wasn't at the mercy of strangers. The baby moved constantly now, rolling and stretching in the limited space. Maya talked to her while she worked, explaining what she was doing, why they were here, what they were fighting for. Your great-great-great-great-grandfather built this place, she said, testing the stability of the porch railing. He built it for a family he loved. They died, but the house survived. And now we're here. You and me. Hartwell's coming home. On the 4th day, Maya hiked back to her car. She'd left it at the end of the logging road, since driving it farther would destroy what was left of suspension, and drove into town. She needed to find a lawyer, not Merritt, who'd handled estate transfer, but someone who specialized in mining claims and property disputes. The Boone Public Library had computers with internet access. Maya settled in for research, pulling up every article, court case, and legal precedent she could find about mining rights, mineral theft, and legacy claims in North Carolina. What she learned was both encouraging and terrifying. North Carolina law had no statute of limitations on theft of mineral rights. If the Morrisons had extracted gold from beneath Hartwell property, and if Maya could prove it, she could file claim for the value of everything they'd taken, plus interest compounded over 139 years. But proving it would be extraordinarily difficult. The original Morrison mine had closed in 1927. Records from the 1880s were incomplete. Physical evidence was buried under almost a century and a half of mountain weather. Any trial would be her word, backed by Ezra's journals, against the Morrison family's army of lawyers and expert witnesses. Still, the case was winnable, especially if she could find someone brave enough to take it on. She searched, mining rights attorney North Carolina. A dozen firms appeared, most based in Charlotte or Raleigh. She called 3 before lunch. All 3 declined once they heard the Morrison name. Too much conflict of interest. One said, Morrison Mining is a major client for half the firms in this state. The 4th lawyer she called was different. Sarah Chin operated a solo practice out of Asheville, specializing in what her website called David versus Goliath cases, property rights, mineral disputes, environmental justice. When Maya explained her situation, carefully, leaving out the stolen gold until she knew Chung could be trusted, the lawyer listened without interrupting. Let me see if I understand, Chin said when Maya finished. You've inherited mountain property adjacent to Morrison Holdings. They've offered to buy you out. You've refused. And you believe you have historical evidence that impacts their mining operations? Yes. What kind of evidence? Maya hesitated. I'd prefer to show you in person. It's extensive. Journals, maps, surveys from the 1880s. From 1885? Miss Hartwell, I'll be honest, documentation that old is difficult to use in court. Chain of custody issues, authenticity questions. The fact that key witnesses are all dead. I understand, but the evidence is compelling. And if the Morrisons are planning to reopen mining operations, they need an answer for what their ancestors took from mine. Chin was quiet for a moment. Are you prepared for a long fight? Because the Morrisons won't settle quietly. They'll drag this out for years if they can. They'll attack your credibility, your evidence, everything. Can you afford that, especially with a baby coming? I can't afford not to fight, Maya said quietly. This is all I have. The only thing my daughter will inherit. If I give it up without a fight, what am I teaching her? That power always wins? That death is okay if enough time passes. All right, Chin said, and Maya heard respect in her voice. Come to Asheville. Bring your evidence. Let's see what you have. They scheduled a meeting for 2 days later. Maya spent those days preparing. She organized Ezra's documents chronologically, created a timeline of events, made copies of the most crucial evidence. She also did something else. She started documenting everything happening now. She photographed the cabin, the property boundaries, the creek. She recorded every phone call, saved every text message. She wrote detailed notes about Clayton Morrison's call, about the hunters who confronted her, about the woman at the courthouse who'd warned her to be careful. If this became a legal battle, when it became a legal battle, she wanted an ironclad record. The night before her meeting with Chun, Maya sat at the cabin table by lamplight and opened the cradle she'd found in the root cellar. She brought it upstairs, cleaned it carefully, oiled the rockers. It was beautiful work, each detail showing Ezra's grief and hope. She set it near the fireplace, imagining her daughter sleeping there in a few months. The image was so vivid it hurt. Her baby safe, warm, in a home that belonged to them, surrounded by the mountain silence Ezra had chosen for his refuge. Well, you're going to make this work, Maya whispered to her belly. Whatever it takes. The drive to Asheville the next morning took 2 hours on winding mountain roads. Sarah Chen's office was in a converted warehouse downtown, shared space with an environmental nonprofit and a legal aid clinic. Chen herself was younger than her website photo suggested, maybe 35, with short black hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She gestured Maya to a chair and didn't waste time on pleasantries. Show me what you have. Maya spread the documents across Chen's desk. The lawyer read in silence, occasionally making notes, her expression unreadable. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Finally, Chen looked up. This is extraordinary. Your great-great-great-grandfather was meticulous. Can we use it? Maybe. The journals are detailed enough to be credible. The surveys match county records I can verify. The geological reports. She tapped one of Ezra's maps. These are actually remarkable. He identified gold veins that Morrison's operation eventually confirmed existed. So we have a case? Chen leaned back in her chair. We have the foundation of a case. But Miss Hartwell, I need you to understand what you're suggesting. You're claiming that the Morrison family fortune, going back almost a century and a half, was built on theft, that they knowingly extracted minerals from your family's property. That's not just a civil lawsuit. That's fraud on a massive scale. I know. The Morrisons will fight this with everything they have. They'll claim the journals are forgeries. They'll argue the surveys are inaccurate. They'll bring in expert witnesses to contradict every piece of evidence. And they'll make your life very, very difficult while they do it. Maya met her eyes. I'm already 7 months pregnant, living in a cabin with no power or running water, surviving on money I borrowed from a 139-year-old trust. My life is already difficult. At least this way I'm fighting for something. Chen studied her, then nodded slowly. All right, here's what we do. First, I verify everything I can through independent sources, county records, geological surveys, historical mining reports. If your evidence holds up under scrutiny, we file a formal claim with the Mining Board for compensation regarding historical mineral extraction from Hartwell property. How long will that take? Verification? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Filing the claim? Another month for proper documentation. After that, Chun grimaced. Years, potentially. The Morrisons will challenge every step. But if we can prove theft occurred, North Carolina law allows for recovery of extracted mineral value plus interest. That could be substantial. How substantial? If Morrison's mine extracted even a fraction of their total production from your land, and if we can prove it, we're talking millions, possibly tens of millions when you factor in compound interest over 139 years. Maya's hands trembled. She placed them on her belly, feeling the baby move. What do I need to do? Right now? Nothing. Let me verify the evidence. In the meantime, don't communicate with the Morrisons. Don't sign anything. Don't make any agreements. Don't discuss this with anyone. The moment they realize what you have, they'll try to shut you down. They already know I exist. Clayton Morrison called me. Tried to buy the property. For how much? $200,000. Said he had flexibility to go higher. Chen's eyes narrowed. That's interesting. For 42 acres of Rocky Mountain ground? Miss Hartwell, there's something you should know. I pulled the Morrison mining permit applications before you arrived. Their proposed new mining operation requires uninterrupted property control for environmental compliance. Even small gaps in their claim would disqualify them from certain extraction methods. So they need my land for their new mine to work? Not just need, they're desperate for it. Without your property, their entire project is jeopardized. They've already invested millions in equipment, permits, engineering studies. Your 42 acres is the difference between a $200 million development and a failed project. Maya sat back, understanding crystallizing. That's why he offered so much so quickly, and why he'll offer more when you keep refusing. But Miss Hartwell, here's what concerns me. If they're that desperate, and if they realize you have evidence that threatens not just their new mine, but their entire historical fortune. Chen's expression was serious. They might escalate beyond legal tactics. You mean they'd try to intimidate me? Or worse. I'm not trying to scare you, but you're alone on a remote property, 7 months pregnant. If the Morrisons decide to make your life difficult, they have the resources to do it. Maya thought hunters. The business card left on her windshield. The woman at the courthouse warning her to be careful. They already are. Chen nodded grimly. Then we need to move fast. I'll start verification immediately. In the meantime, I want you to document everything. Every interaction, every phone call, every person who shows up at your property. Can you do that? I've already started. Good. Chen gathered the documents carefully. I'm going to make copies of all of this. Store them securely. You should do the same. Multiple copies, kept in different locations. This evidence is your leverage. Don't lose it. They spent another hour going over details. Chen asking specific questions about property boundaries, creek access, and whether Maya had noticed any recent surveying activity. When they finished, Chen walked her to the door. Miss Hartwell, one more thing. You're going to need a safe place to stay during this fight. That cabin is historically significant and legally yours, but it's also isolated. If something happens, if you go into labor, if there's an emergency, you're an hour from help. I don't have anywhere else. There are shelters, programs for pregnant women. No. Maya's voice was firm. I'm not leaving. That cabin is mine. It's my daughter's inheritance. If I abandon it, even temporarily, the Morrisons will claim I've forfeited my interest. I'm staying. Chen looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. You're tougher than you look. That's good. You're going to need to be. Maya drove back to Raven's Gap as the sun set behind the ridges. When she reached the cabin, full dark had fallen. She parked her car at the end of the logging road and started to hike in, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. Halfway up the trace, she heard something that stopped her cold. Voices, coming from the direction of the cabin. Maya clicked off her flashlight and stood in darkness, listening. 2 men, maybe 3, speaking in low tones. Then light. Flashlight beams sweeping across the clearing where the cabin sat. Her heart hammered. She crept forward slowly, staying off the trail, moving through the trees until she could see the cabin. 3 men stood on the porch. One tried the door, locked, as she'd left it. Another examined the new padlock she'd installed on the root cellar entrance. The third swept his flashlight across the windows. She's been here recently, one said. Stove still warm. Probably out gathering firewood or something. Woman alone, pregnant. She can't have gone far. Boss wants to know what she's planning. If she's really going to stay, or if this is just some kind of leverage play. Maya's blood went cold. Morrison had sent people to check on her, to watch her, to assess whether she was serious about staying. She waited in the darkness, barely breathing while they searched. After 15 minutes, they gave up and headed back down the trail, passing within 20 feet of where she hid. When their voices faded, Maya waited another 10 minutes before emerging. She approached the cabin carefully, checking for signs they'd broken in. Everything was secure. They'd looked but hadn't damaged anything. Still, the violation was complete. They'd been here, in her space, looking through her things, trying to understand her. Inside, Maya locked the door and wedged a chair under the handle. She lit the kerosene lamp and sat at the table, thinking. Chun was right. The Morrisons were escalating, and this was just the beginning. She pulled out her phone. No signal here, but she could draft a message to send tomorrow when she had reception, and began typing everything that had happened. Date, time, description of the men, every word she'd overheard, documentation, evidence, protection. The baby kicked hard, a rolling movement that made Maya's entire belly shift. She placed both hands on the swell, feeling her daughter move beneath her palms. "We're okay," she whispered. "We're going to be okay. I won't let them scare us away." But as she sat in the lamplight, alone in a cabin that had waited 139 years for a Hartwell to return, Maya understood that the real fight was just beginning, and she had no idea if she was strong enough to win it. Section 6. The threat escalates external pressure. The harassment started small. The next morning, Maya hiked down her car and found all 4 tires slashed. The Honda sat on its rims, completely disabled. No note, no witnesses, nothing but the clean cuts through rubber that would cost $400 she didn't have to replace. She stood in the cold morning air, breath steaming, and felt rage instead of fear. They thought this would break her, thought stranding her on the mountain would force her to leave. They were wrong. Maya hiked back to the cabin, fired up the camp stove, and made breakfast. Instant oatmeal and wheat coffee, while she thought. She had her phone. When she got to a high enough point on the ridge, she could get signal. She could call Chun, call a tow service, call the sheriff's office. But what would she tell them? She had no proof who'd slashed the tires. No witnesses. The Morrisons could claim vandals, teenagers, random crime. After breakfast, she hiked to the ridge point where she'd found signal before. 3 bars. She called Chun first. "They slashed my tires," Maya said without preamble. "Last night while I was in the cabin." Chun swore softly. "Did you see who did it?" "No, but 3 men searched my property yesterday evening while I hid in the woods. I heard them talking about reporting back to the boss. That's harassment and trespassing. Did you call the sheriff?" "Not yet." "What's the point?" "I have no proof it was Morrison's people." "File a report anyway. Start creating an official record. Every incident documented. It builds a pattern." Chun paused. "Miss Hartwell, I'm worried about your safety. You're alone up there, pregnant, with no transportation now. If something happens, I'll manage. Just tell me you found something in the evidence." "I have, actually. That's why I was about to call you. The geological surveys your great-great-great-grandfather commissioned? I found the original company records. They're archived at NC State. The surveyor's notes confirm everything Ezra documented. Gold veins running beneath both Morrison property and Hartwell property, with the richest deposits actually under your land." Maya's pulse quickened. "That's good. That's very good. It means Ezra's journals are corroborated by independent third-party evidence. It's not just family documents. It's professional geological work from 1884. No court can dismiss that as easily as they could dismiss personal journals. So we have a real case? We have a strong foundation. I'm still verifying the mining production records, trying to calculate exactly how much gold Morrison extracted from your land. But Miss Hartwell, there's something else. Something I found in the Morrison mining permit applications." "What?" "They're not just planning to reopen the old mine. They're planning to use a technique called heap leaching. Basically, they spray cyanide solution on crushed ore to extract gold from low-grade deposits. It's controversial, potentially dangerous to watersheds. The EPA has strict regulations. What does that have to do with my property?" The creek running through your land feeds directly into the water system they'd need to monitor. If there's any contamination, it would show up in your creek first. Environmental regulations require them to have continuous access to upstream water sources for testing. Without your property, they can't legally operate their heap leach system. Maya absorbed this. So my 42 acres doesn't just complete their claim. It's essential for their permits. Exactly. Which means they're even more desperate than we thought. And Miss Hartwell, desperation makes people dangerous. After the call, Maya hiked down to file a sheriff's report about the tires. The deputy who took her statement was polite, but skeptical. You're living where? In the old Hartwell cabin. He wrote slowly, as if documenting a story he didn't quite believe. And you think someone specifically targeted your vehicle? I know they did. The cuts are clean, deliberate. All 4 tires. That's not random vandalism. Do you have any enemies? Anyone who might want to harass you? Maya hesitated. If she named the Morrisons without proof, she'd sound paranoid. I've recently inherited property that's valuable to some people. I refuse to sell. The deputy's expression shifted. Something passed across his face, quick and unreadable. What property? The Hartwell homestead. 42 acres in Raven's Gap. He set down his pen. The land adjacent to Morrison Mining's new development? Yes. Miss, let me give you some advice. The Morrisons are important to this county. They employ a lot of people. If they've made you an offer for that property, you should seriously consider taking it. Are you telling me not to file this report? I'm telling you that filing a report without evidence won't accomplish anything except making you look difficult. The Morrisons are good people. If there's a problem, talking to them directly would probably solve it faster than involving law enforcement. Maya stared at him. A crime was committed against my property. You're supposed to investigate. And I will. I'll drive out there, look at your vehicle, write it up. But between you and me, you're not going to get anywhere with this. County's sympathetic to development. Jobs matter more than... He gestured vaguely at her at the situation. More than property disputes. Maya left the sheriff's office, shaking with anger. The deputy had basically told her the Morrisons were untouchable, that she was wasting everyone's time by trying to hold her ground. She walked to the public library, used their computer to research tire shops. The cheapest she found would charge $320 for 4 used tires installed. She had $172 left in her bank account. The trust fund could provide emergency money, but she was trying to save that for legal fees when the real fight started. She sat at the library computer, head in her hands, feeling the baby kick against her ribs. 7 months pregnant, stranded on a mountain, with people actively working to drive her away. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she should just take Morrison's offer and disappear somewhere easier, somewhere safer. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Miss Hartwell, this is Clayton Morrison. I heard about your vehicle trouble. I'd like to help. I can have 4 new tires delivered and installed today, no charge. Consider a gesture of goodwill between neighbors. Maya stared at the message, ice spreading through her chest. He knew. Morrison knew about the slashed tires, which meant either his people had done it or they'd reported it to him immediately after. This wasn't goodwill. This was a message. We can make your life difficult, or we can make it easier. Your choice. She typed back, no thank you. I'll handle my own repairs. His response came within seconds. The offer stands. I'm also prepared to increase our purchase offer to $300,000. That would solve a lot of problems for you. Miss Hartwell, think about your baby. Think about what kind of life you can give her. Maya's hands clenched on the phone. The manipulation was blatant, using her pregnancy as leverage, painting himself as concerned when he was the one applying pressure. She typed, my answer is no. Stop contacting me. Then she blocked the number. At the library desk, she asked about community resources. The librarian, a kind woman in her 50s, pulled up information about programs for pregnant women, emergency housing, food assistance. Maya took notes, swallowing pride. She might need this soon. Are you all right, dear? The librarian asked gently. You look exhausted. I'm managing. Just some complications with property I inherited. The Hartwell place? I heard someone had finally claimed it. The librarian lowered her voice. My grandmother used to tell stories about Ezra Hartwell. Said he was driven mad by the Morrison mine, watching him get rich off gold he believed was partly his. Maya's attention sharpened. Your grandmother knew Ezra? Not personally, but her father worked at the Morrison mine in the early days. 1880s, 90s. She said the miners all knew Morrison's operation extended under the property line. They'd joke about it, taking Hartwell gold while Hartwell watched helpless. The librarian's expression was sympathetic. I don't know if there's any truth to it, but people talked. Did your grandmother ever mention how much gold they took? She said, plenty. Said the richest vein in the whole operation ran right under what used to be Hartwell land. Morrison worked it for decades. The librarian paused. Why? Are you thinking of making a claim? Maya chose her words carefully. I'm thinking about a lot of things. That afternoon, she called a tow service. $150 to pull her Honda out of the mountains and deliver it to a tire shop. With installation, the total came to $480. She authorized Chun to release funds from the trust. While she waited for the tow truck, she hiked back to the cabin and continued documenting. She photographed everything. The property boundaries, the creek, the cabin's interior and exterior. She wrote detailed descriptions of her confrontations with the hunters, with Morrison, with the deputy. She also did something else. She took Ezra's most valuable documents, the journals, the geological surveys, the proof of theft, and sealed them in waterproof bags. Then she hiked to a spot half a mile from the cabin, found a distinctive rock formation, and buried them. If Morrison's people searched the cabin again, they wouldn't find the evidence. Maya kept copies with her and with Chun, but the originals were now hidden where only she could retrieve them. That night, she lay in the sleeping bag near the fireplace, too uncomfortable to sleep. The baby was restless, moving constantly. Maya's back ached, her feet were swollen, and she was so tired she could barely think straight. But she didn't leave, didn't even consider it seriously. This cabin had waited 139 years for a Hartwell come home. Ezra had built it in grief and hope, had left evidence of theft because he believed someday someone would be brave enough to use it. Maya was that someone. She had to be, because the alternative, giving up, taking Morrison's money, disappearing, would mean teaching her daughter that power always won, that standing up for yourself wasn't worth the cost. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby move. We're staying, she whispered. Whatever they do, we're staying. This is ours. They don't get to take it. The fire crackled. Outside, the November wind rattled bare branches. The mountain held its darkness close. And in the morning, Maya would wake up and fight another day. Because that's what Hartwells did. They survived. Section 7. The Stand Major Confrontation. Maya's water broke on a Tuesday morning in early December, 3 weeks before her due date. She was carrying firewood from the shed when she felt the warm gush, looked down at the wet spreading across her jeans, and understood with perfect clarity that everything was about to change. She dropped the wood and stood in the clearing, hand on her belly, breathing through the first contraction. Not panic. She wouldn't allow panic. Just cold assessment. The cabin was 2 miles from her car. Her car was 40 minutes on rough roads from the hospital in Boone. She was alone. She had maybe 6 hours, maybe less, before the baby came. Maya went inside, grabbed the bag she'd packed weeks ago, just in case, and the phone. No signal inside the cabin. She'd have to get to the ridge point. The hike would take 20 minutes normally. Pregnant and in labor, maybe 30. She started walking. The contractions came every 15 minutes at first, manageable. She focused on breathing, on placing one foot in front of the other. The December air was cold enough that her breath steamed, but sweat ran down her back beneath her jacket. The baby had dropped lower in the past week, putting pressure on her pelvis that made every step an effort. Halfway to the ridge point, the contractions jumped to 10 minutes apart. Maya stopped, braced herself against a tree, and rode out the wave of pain. When it passed, she kept moving. She reached the ridge just as another contraction hit. This one was stronger, stealing her breath, making her double over. When it finally eased, she pulled out her phone with shaking hands. 2 bars. She called 911 first. The dispatcher was calm, professional. "Ma'am, where are you located?" Maya gave her best description. The ridge above Raven's Gap, 2 miles from where the logging road ended. The dispatcher said they'd send an ambulance, but it would take time to reach her. Could she get to a road? "I'll try," Maya said. She called Sarah Chin next. "The baby's coming. I need you to do something for me." "Maya, Jesus, where are you? Are you safe? I'm hiking out to my car now." "But Chun, listen. If something happens to me, the evidence is buried." She gave the exact location, described the rock formation. "Everything's there. The journals, the surveys, all of it. You find it and you finish this. Promise me. Nothing's going to happen to you. Get to the hospital. We'll handle the rest later. Promise me." "I promise. Now move." Maya ended the call and started down the trail toward her car. The contractions were 8 minutes apart now, hard enough that she had to stop completely each time, breathing through pain that radiated from her back around to her abdomen in waves. She was halfway down when she heard a vehicle engine. Impossible, there was no road here. But the sound grew louder, and then she saw it, a pickup truck navigating the logging road, coming from the direction of her car. The truck stopped, and Clayton Morrison got out. Maya froze. Morrison raised both hands, showing they were empty. "Miss Hartwell, I'm not here to fight. One of my men saw you hiking toward the road. You looked distressed. Are you all right?" A contraction hit before she could answer. Maya gripped the tree trunk, riding it out. Morrison waited, his expression shifting from calculated concern to genuine alarm. "You're in labor." Very observant, Maya managed when she could speak. "Let me drive you to the hospital." "I don't need your help." "Yes, you do. You're in active labor, alone on a mountain, at least 30 minutes from medical care. Whatever is between us, I'm not leaving a pregnant woman in distress." Another contraction. Stronger this time, only 6 minutes since the last. Maya's legs shook. She looked at Morrison, her enemy, the man trying to steal her property, the descendant of the family that had robbed hers, and made a calculation: pride or survival, her daughter's safety or her own stubbornness. "Fine," she said, "but we're going to talk on the way." Morrison helped her into the truck. The interior was warm, leather seats, everything expensive. He drove carefully over the rough logging road, glancing at her between contractions. "How far apart?" he asked. 6 minutes. Maybe less. "First baby?" "Yes. My wife had 3. I remember the panic." His voice was almost kind. "You're going to be fine. We'll get you there." They reached the paved road. Morrison accelerated smoothly. Maya breathed through another contraction, then turned to face him. "Why are you really doing this?" "Doing what?" "Helping me. You've been harassing me for weeks. Slashing my tires, sending people to watch me, pressuring me to sell. Why the sudden compassion?" Morrison's jaw tightened. "I didn't slash your tires." "Your people did." "No, they didn't. I told my team to keep an eye on the property, to assess whether you were serious about staying. I never authorized vandalism or intimidation." "Then who did it?" "I don't know. But Miss Hartwell, there are other people interested in that land. I'm not the only one who wants your property." Maya filed that away to examine later. "You need my land for your mining operation." "Yes, and you've been trying to force me out." Morrison was quiet for a moment, navigating a sharp curve. "I've been trying to negotiate. There's a difference. I made you a fair offer, multiple offers. You refused, so I've been applying pressure, making it clear how difficult life in that cabin would be. I thought eventually you'd see reason. By stranding me without transportation, by sending the sheriff to tell me the county doesn't care about crimes against me." "I never sent the sheriff." He stopped. "Wait, a deputy told you that?" "Essentially, yes. Said I should just take your offer and stop making trouble." Morrison swore under his breath. "That wasn't me. That was someone else." Another contraction hit, harder than the previous ones. Maya couldn't speak, could only breathe through the wave of pain that seemed to last forever. When it passed, she was shaking. Morrison glanced at her, concerned. For minutes. We're almost there. Morrison, I need you to understand something. Maya's voice was steady despite the pain. I'm not selling. Not for $300,000, not for $3 million. That land is mine. It was stolen from my family, and I'm taking it back. Stolen? Miss Hartwell, my family purchased that mining claim legally in 1883. Your family extracted gold from beneath Hartwell property for decades. I have proof. Geological surveys from 1884, journals documenting the theft, production records showing the richest veins ran under my land. Your entire fortune was built on minerals stolen from my family. Morrison's face went pale. That's not, you can't. I can prove it, and I'm going to. When this baby is born and I'm recovered, I'm filing a formal claim with the state mining board. I'm suing for recovery of every ounce of gold your family extracted illegally, plus interest compounded over 139 years. Conservative estimates put that at $40 million. The truck swerved slightly. Morrison steadied it, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. You're bluffing. I have documentation. Survey maps, geological reports, journals showing your great-great-grandfather knew exactly what he was doing. He bribed my great-great-great-grandfather into selling timber cheap, then used that timber to build a mine that extracted Hartwell gold. It's all documented. Even if that were true, and I'm not conceding it is, no court would overturn 140 years of settled property claims. North Carolina has no statute of limitations on mineral theft. The gold was ours. You took it. The law is clear. Morrison pulled into the hospital emergency entrance. He put the truck in park, but didn't move to get out. Miss Hartwell, if you pursue this, you'll destroy my family. The company, the jobs, everything. Is that really what you want? Maya opened the door. Another contraction was building. I want what's mine. What was always mine. You had 139 years to make this right. Your family chose wealth over justice. That ends now. She got out of the truck and walked into the emergency room. Behind her, Morrison sat motionless, his face a mask of shock and anger. The hospital took over. Wheelchair, intake forms, calls to the maternity ward. Maya was dilated to 6 centimeters, moving fast. They prepped her for delivery, got her into a room, started in 4. A nurse with kind eyes held her hand through contractions. Is someone coming? Partner, family? No, Maya said. Just me. You're doing great, honey. Just breathe. The doctor arrived, a woman in her 40s with competent hands and a calm demeanor. She examined Maya and nodded. You're at 8 centimeters. This baby's coming soon. You ready? Maya thought of the cabin waiting in the mountains, of Ezra's journals buried under a rock formation, of the fight ahead, the legal battle, the vindication that was finally within reach. I'm ready, she said. Her daughter was born at 4:17 p.m., tiny and furious, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival to the entire ward. They placed her on Maya's chest, warm and wet and perfect, and Maya felt something inside her shift and settle. She's beautiful, the nurse said. What's her name? Maya looked down at her daughter, at this tiny person who would inherit everything, who would grow up knowing her mother had fought and won, and made a decision. Sarah, she said. Sarah Ezra Hartwell. After her family, after the ghosts who built the cabin, and left her the tools to reclaim what was stolen. They moved her to a recovery room. Maya held Sarah, marveling at her tiny fingers, her perfect ears, the way she rooted hungrily for milk. The nurse showed her how to help the baby latch, and when Sarah finally figured it out, nursing with single-minded determination, Maya laughed through exhausted tears. She'd done it, against everything, homelessness, pregnancy, isolation, harassment. She'd survived to this moment. Now came the harder part. Saracen arrived that evening, bursting into a room of flowers and a stuffed bear. Oh my God, Maya. She's perfect. She is. Maya shifted Sarah carefully. Did Morrison contact you? He did, about an hour ago. He wants to meet you, me, and his lawyers. He says there are things we need to discuss. He believed me about the evidence. I think the truck ride convinced him you're serious. Maya, he's scared. Really scared. His lawyers are already digging through historical records, try to find weaknesses in our case. Will they find any? Not enough. I verified everything. The geological surveys are ironclad. The journals are consistent with county records. The production estimates from the Morrison mine match up with what Ezra documented. We have a solid case. Maya looked down at Sarah, asleep now, her tiny chest rising and falling. I want to settle. Chun blinked. What? Not for what he's offering. On our terms. I want acknowledgement that the gold was stolen. I want compensation, real compensation, not a buyout. And I want my land protected forever. No mining, no development. Preserved for Sarah and her descendants. That's asking a lot. It's asking for justice. Tell Morrison's lawyers those are our terms. If they refuse, we file with the mining board and take this public. Every news outlet in North Carolina will want this story. Wealthy family builds fortune on theft, refuses to compensate rightful owners. His reputation will be destroyed. Chin smiled slowly. You've thought this through. I've had 9 months of pregnancy and 3 weeks in a cabin with no electricity. I've had time to think. The meeting was scheduled for a week later, after Maya was cleared to leave the hospital. Sarah was healthy, nursing well, gaining weight. They discharged Maya on day 3 with instructions to rest, to avoid stress, to let her body heal. Maya laughed at that last part. She was about to enter a legal battle with one of North Carolina's wealthiest families. Stress was unavoidable. Chin picked her up from the hospital. They'd arranged temporary housing, a small apartment in Boone, paid for by the Emergency Trust Fund, just until meeting was over and they knew what came next. The apartment was warm, had electricity and running water and heat. After weeks in the cabin, it felt like luxury, but it wasn't home. Home was 2 miles up a mountain, waiting. The meeting took place in a conference room at Morrison Mining's corporate headquarters. Clayton Morrison was there, flanked by 3 lawyers in expensive suits. On Maya's side of the table, just her and Sarah Chun. Maya wore the only professional clothes she owned, a blouse that didn't quite fit post-pregnancy and dress pants she could barely button. Sarah was in a car seat beside her chair, sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the war being waged around her. Morrison looked tired, older than when he'd driven Maya to the hospital. His lawyers looked grim. The lead attorney, a man named Philip Graves, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, opened a folder. Miss Hartwell, we reviewed the documents your attorney provided, the journals, the surveys, the geological reports. We have concerns about their authenticity. They're authentic, Chin interrupted. I've had them verified by 3 independent experts. Carbon dating confirms the journals are from the 1880s. The geological surveys match records archived at NC State. The handwriting analysis confirms they were written by Ezra Hartwell. You can challenge him in court if you want, but you'll lose. Graves' jaw tightened. Even if we accept them as genuine, the legal questions are complex. Property law in the 1880s was different. Mining rights were murky. What you're calling theft may have been legal at the time. Mineral theft is mineral theft, Chin said flatly. Extraction of gold from beneath property you don't own is illegal in any era. North Carolina mining law was clear even in 1883. Your clients knew they were operating under Hartwell land. They did it anyway. Clayton Morrison spoke up. My great-great-grandfather made a business deal with Ezra Hartwell. They had an agreement. He coerced Ezra into selling timber a loss to avoid being arrested for trespassing on your land, Maya said quietly. Then he used that timber to build a mine that extracted Hartwell gold. That's not a business deal. That's extortion followed by theft. Morrison's face flushed. You're talking about destroying everything my family built. Your family built it with stolen gold. Silence. Sarah stirred in her car seat, making small sounds. Maya reached down and rocked the seat gently until the baby settled. Graves cleared his throat. Miss Hartwell, Let's be practical. Even if your claims have merit, litigation would take years. Tens of thousands in legal fees. You'd be fighting the Morrison family's resources the entire time. Can you afford that? Can you afford the publicity? Maya met his eyes. The news story writes itself. Wealthy mining family built fortune on theft, refuses to compensate rightful heirs. Every environmental group that opposes your new mining operation will use this. Every competitor will question your ethics. Your company's reputation will be destroyed. Morrison leaned forward. What do you want? Acknowledgement, compensation, and protection for my land. Be specific. Maya glanced at Chun, who nodded. This was the moment they had prepared for. First, public acknowledgement that Morrison Mining extracted gold from Hartwell property between 1885 and 1927 without proper compensation. A formal apology from the Morrison family. Morrison's lawyers began to object, but he waved them silent. Continue. Second, financial compensation. We've calculated the value of gold extracted from beneath Hartwell land at approximately $12 million at 1927 prices. Adjusted for inflation and compounded interest, that's $43 million in today's dollars. We're willing to settle for $20 million. Graves nearly came out of his chair. $20 million? That's less than half what you legally owe. Chin finished. Consider it a generous settlement. Third, Maya continued, my 42 acres is placed in a permanent conservation trust. No mining, no development, no sale outside the Hartwell family. The land remains wild forever. And fourth, she added, Morrison Mining withdraws its permit application for the new heap leach operation. You don't reopen the mine. You don't extract another ounce of gold from these mountains. The room erupted. Morrison's lawyers talked over each other, calling the demands outrageous, impossible, financial suicide. Morrison himself sat silent, staring at Maya. Finally, he raised a hand. His lawyers quieted. Why the fourth demand? Morrison asked, why do you care if we mine? Maya looked down at Sarah, still sleeping peacefully. Because my daughter will grow up on that land. I won't let her drink water contaminated by cyanide heap leaching. I won't let her breathe air polluted by mining operations. The mountains gave my family refuge when we had nothing. I'm not letting them be destroyed for gold. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, we need time to discuss this privately. Maya and Chin left the conference room, waited in the lobby. 20 minutes passed. 30. Sarah woke and needed to nurse. Maya fed her in a quiet corner, whispering promises. We're going to win. We're going to make this right. You're going to grow up knowing your mother fought for you. Finally, they were called back in. Morrison looked exhausted. We have a counterproposal. We're listening, Chin said. We'll acknowledge the historical extraction occurred. We'll issue a public statement saying the Morrison family recognizes that mining operations in the 1880s may have inadvertently extracted minerals from adjacent properties, and we apologize for any harm caused. May have? Inadvertently? Maya shook her head. No. The statement says you knowingly extracted gold from Hartwell property without compensation. No weasel words. Graves started to argue, but Morrison cut him off. Fine. We'll use your language. We'll also establish a $15 million settlement paid over 10 years. $20 million lump sum. We don't have $20 million liquid. Then liquidate assets. You built this fortune on stolen gold. You can afford to return it. Morrison's jaw worked. Finally, $18 million. Lump sum. That's our final offer. Maya looked at Chun, who gave a tiny nod. It was good. Better than they'd hoped for in settlement. And the land trust. Maya asked, the mining permits? Morrison sighed heavily. Your land goes into permanent conservation. We'll draft the legal documents. As for the permits, he looked at his lawyers, who looked pained. We'll withdraw the heap leach application. But Miss Hartwell, that project represents jobs, economic development. You're asking us to abandon hundreds of millions in potential revenue. I'm asking you not to poison the mountains my daughter will inherit. There are other methods, less controversial extraction techniques. Could we compromise? We withdraw the heap leach application, but pursue conventional mining with strict environmental controls. Maya thought about it. She wanted to say no, wanted to end Morrison mining forever. But Chin had warned her, be strategic. Take the wins you can get. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Conventional mining only. EPA oversight. Monthly water testing in my creek. Results made public. If there's any contamination, operations cease immediately. Morrison nodded slowly. Acceptable. And one more thing, Maya said, a full scholarship fund. College education for any Hartwell descendant who wants it in perpetuity. $200,000 endowed. That's, Graves started. Nothing compared to what you stole, Maya finished. My daughter deserves the education your family paid for with our gold. Morrison looked at her across the table. This pregnant woman who'd been living in a 139-year-old cabin, who'd survived harassment and isolation and early labor, who'd refused to back down despite having every reason to give up. You're as stubborn as your great-great-great-grandfather. I'm stronger, Maya said, because I had someone to fight for. Morrison smiled tiredly. Deal. We'll have the papers drawn up by end of week. They shook hands. Maya's hand was small in Morrison's grip, but her handshake was firm. Outside the conference room, Chin grabbed Maya in a hug. You did it. My God, you actually did it. We did it, Maya corrected. I couldn't have won without you. $18 million, Maya. Your daughter will never want for anything. Maya looked down at Sarah, awake now, watching her mother with dark, serious eyes. She already has everything that matters. This just makes it official. Section 8. The victory resolution achieved. The news broke 3 days later. Morrison Mining acknowledges historical mineral extraction, pays $18 million settlement to Hartwell, heir. The story ran in every major North Carolina newspaper. Then regional outlets picked it up. Then national news. Maya did one interview with a reporter from the Charlotte Observer who'd been investigating Morrison Mining's environmental practices. She told the story carefully. Ezra's journals, the stolen gold, the 139-year wait for justice. She showed photos of the cabin, of the documents, of baby Sarah sleeping in the hand-carved cradle. What will you do with the settlement? The reporter asked. Maya had thought about this. First, restore the cabin properly. Solar panels, a well, proper insulation. Make it a real home. Second, establish a fund to help other women in situations like mine, pregnant, homeless, desperate. Nobody should have to sleep in their car because the world failed them. And the rest, save it for Sarah. Let her decide what matters when she's old enough to choose. The interview ran with a photo. Maya on the cabin porch, Sarah in her arms, the mountains rising behind them. The headline read, Homeless and Pregnant. She fought a mining empire and won. The public response was overwhelming. Letters arrived at Chen's office. Hundreds of them. Women sharing their own stories of homelessness, of pregnancy alone, of fighting systems designed to crush them. Many sent small donations to the fund Maya had mentioned. $5 here, $20 there. Environmental groups celebrated. Morrison Mining's heap leach permits were withdrawn, and activists called it a victory for mountain preservation. The settlement transferred in 2 weeks. $18 million deposited into an account in Maya's name. The number was so large it felt abstract, meaningless. What mattered was what it represented. Acknowledgement that her family had been wronged. That justice had finally come. The land trust was established with ironclad legal protections. The Hartwell homestead and its 42 acres would never be developed, never be mined, never be sold. It would remain wild for Sarah and her descendants forever. Maya used the first money to hire contractors, local workers who understood mountain building. They descended on the cabin with equipment and expertise. Solar panels went on the reinforced roof. A well was drilled, hitting clean water at 60 feet. Proper insulation was installed, along with modern wood stove that could heat the entire structure efficiently. They repaired the porch, replaced rotted boards, resealed the windows, but they kept the character. The hand-hewn logs, the stone chimney, the bones of what Ezra had built. This was still his cabin, his legacy. They were just making it livable. Vernon, the kind lawyer who'd handled the estate transfer, visited during construction. He walked through with Maya, examining the work, nodding approval. Ezra would be proud, he said. You honored his intent. You fought when he couldn't. I had advantages he didn't. I had his evidence. I had time and modern laws and people willing to help. You had courage. That's rarer than you think. When the contractors finished in February, Maya moved back in. The cabin was transformed but recognizable. Warm in winter, cool in summer, with running water and lights that turn on with a switch. Luxury compared to November's conditions, but still remote, still quiet, still surrounded by mountains that held their peace close. Sarah thrived. She nursed hungrily, grew visibly day by day, slept in Ezra's cradle that Maya had sanded and oiled until it gleamed. Maya talked to her constantly, explaining the world, the mountains, the family they came from. Your great-great-great-great-grandfather built this house, she'd say, rocking the cradle. He lost everything, but he left us the tools to fight back. You're here because he believed someday someone would be strong enough to finish what he started. In March, Maya established a fund she'd promised, the Hartwell Women's Emergency Trust. $20,000 endowed, managed by Sarah Chun, available to pregnant women in crisis. No applications, no bureaucracy, just vouchers for food, shelter, medical care, whatever they needed to survive until they could stand on their own. The first recipient was a woman from Asheville, 19 and terrified, kicked out by her family when she refused to terminate her pregnancy. The fund paid for a room, groceries, prenatal care. 2 months later, she gave birth to a healthy son and sent Maya a photo with a note. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else looked away. More women followed. The fund helped them all. In April, Maya received a letter that made her hands shake. The return address was a nursing home in Florida. Inside, careful handwriting on lined paper. Dear Miss Hartwell, my name is Margaret Morrison Fletcher. I'm 91 years old, and I've been following your case in the news. I'm Clayton Morrison's aunt, his father's sister. I want you to know that everything you said about my grandfather is true. He was a hard man who built his fortune through ruthless business practices. The family has known for generations about the Hartwell gold, about the questionable extraction methods. When I was a girl, my father told me the story. He said Ezra Hartwell had gone mad with grief and paranoia, that the gold claims were delusions. But I found my grandfather's private journals after he died. He knew exactly what he was doing. He documented it all. How much gold came from beneath Hartwell land, how he'd manipulated Ezra into the timber deal, how he bribed officials to ignore the theft. I wanted to come forward years ago. My brother threatened to disinherit me if I did. The family reputation mattered more than truth. I'm telling you this now because you deserve to know. You were right. Completely, unquestionably right. And I'm ashamed it took 140 years for Morrison to acknowledge it. I've enclosed a check for $50,000. It's my inheritance from my grandfather's estate. I wanted to go to your women's fund. Let some good come from money that was never rightfully ours. Thank you for your courage. Sincerely, Margaret Morrison Fletcher. Maya read the letter 3 times, then sat at the cabin table and cried. For Ezra, who died believing no one would ever acknowledge the truth. For herself and Sarah. For all the women caught between systems designed to crush them. The check went to the trust. Margaret's story was added to the archive Maya was building, documenting everything, preserving the truth for future generations. Summer arrived. The mountains turned green and lush. Maya hiked with Sarah strapped to her chest, showed her the land that was theirs. The creek where water ran clean and cold, the meadows full of wildflowers, the ridge where you could see 3 states on clear days. Clayton Morrison called once in July. Maya almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Miss Hartwell, I wanted to check in, see how you and the baby are doing. We're well. Good. That's good. A pause. I also want to say I'm sorry. Not the corporate apology my lawyers drafted. A real one. What my family did to yours was wrong. We built our wealth on theft and convinced ourselves it was legitimate because time had passed. You were right to fight us. Maya was quiet, surprised by what sounded like genuine regret. Morrison continued, "The company is transitioning away from mining. We're focusing on sustainable development, conservation easements, renewable energy. The new board voted to establish an environmental justice fund, $5 million to remediate damage from historical mining operations. It's not enough, but it's something." "That's good," Maya said. "It matters." "I hope so. Miss Hartwell, I know we'll never be friends, but I wanted you to know what you did changed things, not just for your family, but for how we think about our legacy. Thank you for that." After he hung up, Maya sat on the porch with Sarah, watching the evening light turn the mountains gold. Change was slow, justice was imperfect, but it was real, and sometimes real was enough. 1 year later, Maya stood in the cabin doorway, watching Sarah take her first steps. The baby, not quite a baby anymore, 14 months old, wobbled across the floor with her arms out for balance, giggling when she reached Maya's legs and collapsed into them. "Good job, sweetheart. You're so strong." The cabin was lived in now. Toys in a basket by the fireplace, books on the shelves, photos on the walls, Maya and Sarah, the two of them alone but together, building a life. Outside, the November air carried the first hint of winter. 2 years since Maya had first climbed this mountain. 7 months pregnant and terrified. 2 years since she'd opened the attic and found Ezra's journals. Everything had changed. The Hartwell Women's Emergency Trust had helped 37 women in its first year. Sarah Chin managed it with fierce dedication, vetting requests, distributing funds, following up to make sure the women were safe and stable. 3 of the women had visited the cabin, wanting to meet Maya, to thank her personally. "You gave me breathing room," one had said. "Just enough space to figure out my next step. That's all I needed." That was all any of them needed. A moment to pause, to rest, to remember they were strong enough to survive whatever came next. The cabin had become something Maya hadn't expected, a refuge, just as Ezra had intended, not for her alone, but for others. 2 women had stayed there over the summer, while waiting for domestic violence shelters to have space. Maya had moved into a small house in Boone temporarily, giving them privacy, safety, silence. They'd left notes when they departed. "Thank you. You saved my life. I'll never forget this." Maya kept the notes in Ezra's journal, pressed between pages where he'd written about Sarah, his wife, not Maya's daughter, and the life he'd hoped to build here. "You did it," Maya whispered to cabin, to Ezra's ghost. "You made a place that mattered, that saved people. It just took 140 years to fulfill its purpose." Sarah Chin visited regularly, bringing groceries and updates on the trust fund. She'd become more than Maya's lawyer. She was a friend, maybe the best friend Maya had ever had. "You should think about writing this down," Chin said during one visit, watching Sarah play with blocks on the floor. "Your story, Ezra's story, the whole thing. People need to know it's possible to fight and win. Maybe someday," Maya said, "when Sarah's older, when I can tell it right." The settlement money sat mostly untouched. Maya had used some for the cabin, for the trust fund, for establishing her life. But the bulk remained, invested carefully, growing. It was Sarah's inheritance. Not just money, but proof that standing up for yourself mattered, that justice could prevail. Vernon Merritt visited in October, bringing papers for Maya to sign, routine trust administration. He'd become a grandfather figure of sorts, checking in monthly, offering advice when asked. "Ezra would burst with pride if he could see what you've done," he said. The cabin restored, the trust helping women, the Morrison family finally accountable. "You accomplished everything he hoped for and more. I had help. I had his evidence. You had courage. Evidence is useless without someone brave enough to use it." As Vernon left, Maya thought about courage. She'd never considered herself brave. She'd just been desperate, backed into a corner with no other options. But maybe that was what courage was. Choosing to fight when giving up would be easier. Winter settled over the mountains. Maya and Sarah stayed warm in the cabin, the new wood stove keeping temperatures comfortable even when snow piled 3 feet deep outside. They had food, heat, safety. everything they needed. On Christmas morning, Maya carried Sarah to the window and showed her the mountains covered in fresh snow, pristine and beautiful. "This is yours," she said softly. "All of it. The land, the cabin, the story of how we fought for it. Your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather built this place in grief. Your mother claimed it in desperation. But you, sweet girl, you'll grow up here in peace. You'll know these mountains as home, not refuge. You'll never wonder where you belong." Sarah babbled something unintelligible and grabbed Maya's hair. Maya laughed and kissed her daughter's forehead. In the cradle by the fireplace, Maya had placed something new, a journal, leather-bound and empty. On the first page, she'd written, "For Sarah Ezra Hartwell, this is your story. How your family fought for justice across 5 generations. How your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather left evidence. How your mother found it and refused to let the truth die. You're born from women who survived impossible things, who lost everything and built it back, who were told they couldn't win and won anyway. Remember that when life gets hard. Remember you come from strength. This cabin, these mountains, this land, they're yours. But more than that, the courage to fight for what's right is yours. It's in your blood. Use it wisely. Love, Mom." Maya planned to fill the journal as Sarah grew, recording their life here, the women who passed through, the continuing legacy of the cabin. Someday, Sarah would read it and understand. That evening, Maya sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, Sarah asleep against her chest. The mountains held their winter darkness, stars brilliant in the cold, clear sky. She thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, homeless, terrified, sleeping in her car with nowhere to go. She barely recognized that version of herself. That Maya had been broken down, stripped of everything, convinced the world was designed to crush people like her. This Maya knew differently. The world was hard, yes. Systems failed people constantly. Power protected itself. But those truths didn't mean you couldn't fight, didn't mean you couldn't win. Sometimes all you needed was evidence, determination, and a refusal to accept that injustice was permanent. Ezra had given her evidence. Desperation had given her determination. And Sarah, tiny, helpless, completely dependent, had given her something to refuse giving up for. Together, it had been enough. A shooting star streaked across the sky. Maya watched it fall and made a wish. That Sarah would grow up strong, that the cabin would continue sheltering those who needed it, that the truth would always matter more than power. Inside, the fire crackled. The cradle waited. The mountain stood eternal. And in the morning, Maya would wake up in a home that had waited 139 years for a Hartwell to come back and make it live again. She was home, finally completely home, and she would never leave. The morning Sarah turned 6, Maya woke to find her daughter already dressed and sitting at the kitchen table with Ezra's original journal open in front of her. "Mama, I can read some of the words now," Sarah said, tracing the faded ink with her finger. "This one says Sarah. That's me and great-great-great-great-grandma, right?" Maya poured coffee and sat beside her daughter. "That's right, sweet girl. You're named after her. She died before Ezra could bring her to this cabin, but he never stopped loving her. That's sad." Sarah's face was serious, thoughtful in ways 6-year-olds could be when confronting big emotions. "But we're here now, so the cabin isn't lonely anymore. No, it's not lonely at all." The cabin had evolved into something between a home and a living memorial. Maya and Sarah lived there year-round now. The solar panels made it comfortable even in the depths of winter. But it also served another purpose, one that had grown organically from Maya's first impulse to help other women in crisis. 3 times a year, the cabin hosted what Maya called mountain healing weekends. Women who'd used the Hartwell Emergency Trust, who'd survived domestic violence, homelessness, desperate circumstances, came to the mountains for 3 days. They hiked, they talked, they shared stories. They healed in the silence and the wilderness that had healed Maya. Sarah had grown up surrounded by these women, absorbing their strength without fully understanding their pain. She knew that some people needed help, that her mama's cabin was a safe place, that the mountains could make sad people feel better. That was enough understanding for now. The details could wait until she was older. Mama, Can I show him the attic today? Sarah asked, referring to her best friend from school in Boone. I want to show her where you found all the papers that made us rich. Maya smiled. We're not rich, baby. We're secure. There's a difference. Miss Chin says we're rich because we have each other in the mountains and a house that can't ever be taken away. She says that's richer than money. Miss Chun is very wise. Sarah closed the journal carefully, the way Maya had taught her. Old things needed gentle hands. Are we having my party here or in town? Here. Your friends are coming up this afternoon. Vernon's bringing the cake. Miss Chen's bringing decorations. And there's a surprise. What surprise? If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise. Sarah groaned dramatically, but couldn't hide her excitement. She ran outside to check on the chickens, descendants of the original flock that had somehow survived and multiplied over the years. Maya watched through the window as her daughter scattered feed, talking to the birds like they were her friends. 6 years. Sometimes it felt like a lifetime since that November morning when Maya had climbed this mountain pregnant and desperate. Sometimes it felt like yesterday. The woman she'd been then barely existed anymore. That Maya had been broken, convinced the world was designed to crush her. This Maya knew better. The world was hard, yes, but it was also full of people who helped, who fought beside you, who believed in justice even when it seemed impossible. Sarah Chin arrived at noon, her car loaded with streamers and balloons and a banner that read Happy 6th Birthday, Sarah. She'd become more than Maya's lawyer over the years. She was family. Aunt Sarah, as the little girl called her, the person who'd fought beside Maya when no one else would. Birthday girl. Chin swept Sarah into a hug. Are you ready for your surprise? Mama won't tell me what it is. That's because it's not here yet, but it will be soon. They decorated while Sarah bounced around asking questions. Vernon Merritt arrived with a cake from the bakery in Boone. Chocolate with pink frosting, Sarah's favorite. He was 83 now, moving slower than he did 5 years ago, but still sharp, still engaged with the trust fund and the cabin's legacy. How's our girl? He asked Maya, watching Sarah hang streamers. Thriving. Reading at a 3rd grade level. Wants to be a park ranger or a geologist or a superhero, depending on the day. Vernon chuckled. She's at Ezra's curiosity. Always asking questions. Always digging deeper. At 2 o'clock, cars began arriving up the logging road, now graded and maintained, accessible year-round thanks to Maya's settlement money. Sarah's classmates tumbled out, 6-year-olds in various states of excitement and chaos. Their parents lingered, making small talk, admiring the cabin. Maya had learned over the years that people were curious about her story. The news coverage had died down, but locals still knew. This was a woman who'd fought Morrison mining and won, who'd been homeless and pregnant, and had turned an inheritance into justice. Some people were awed. Some were skeptical. Most were just politely curious. She didn't mind. The story was true, and the truth didn't need defending. The party was in full swing. Kids running to the clearing, playing hide and seek in the woods, eating cake with the enthusiasm only 6-year-olds could muster, when Maya heard another vehicle approaching. A truck pulled up, and Clayton Morrison got out. Maya tensed. They'd spoken a handful of times over the past 5 years, mostly about trust fund business or environmental monitoring of the watershed. The relationship was cordial but distant, built on mutual respect and the shared knowledge of painful history. But Morrison wasn't alone. A woman got out of the passenger side. Elderly, moving carefully with a cane. Margaret Morrison Fletcher, the aunt who'd sent the letter acknowledging the truth. And from the back seat, a teenage girl, maybe 14 or 15. Morrison approached with his hands visible, the way you approach someone who had reason to be wary. Miss Hartwell, I'm sorry to intrude on the party. We won't stay long. But Margaret wanted to meet you in person, and my daughter Hannah has been asking about the cabin for years. Maya looked at the old woman, who smiled gently. Miss Hartwell, I'm Margaret. We've corresponded, but I wanted to shake your hand, to look you in the eye and say thank you for forcing my family to face the truth. They shook hands. Margaret's grip was surprisingly strong. This is my granddaughter, Hannah, Morrison said. She's doing a school project on family history. She asked to see the cabin where it all started. The teenager looked nervous and fascinated in equal measure. My dad told me everything. About what my great-great-great-grandfather did. About the gold. I wanted to see where your ancestor lived and where you found the proof. Maya studied the girl, seeing genuine curiosity in something else. Maybe shame, maybe the weight of knowing your family's fortune was built on theft. Come inside, Maya said. I'll show you. She led them into the cabin while Saracen supervised the party outside. The interior was warm and lived in now. Sarah's drawings on the walls, toys and baskets. The cradle still by the fireplace, even though Sarah was far too old for it. It's beautiful, Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion. Ezra built something that lasted. Despite everything, he built something that mattered. Maya showed him the attic, empty now except for copies of documents, the original stored safely in a bank vault. She explained how she'd found the journals, the maps, the geological surveys, how Ezra had documented everything, preserving truth for a future he'd never see. Hannah listened with rapt attention, taking notes. Can I ask you something, Miss Hartwell? Of course. Were you scared when you decided to fight my family? Maya considered the question. Terrified. I was 7 months pregnant, homeless, alone. Going up against one of the wealthiest families in North Carolina seemed impossible. But I had Sarah. She placed a hand on her belly, remembering. And I had proof, and I had nothing left to lose. Sometimes it's all you need, proof, purpose, and nothing left to lose. I'm sorry, Hannah said quietly, for what my family did. I know it was a long time ago, but it still matters. It still hurt people. It does matter. And yes, it hurt people. But Hannah, you're not responsible for what your ancestors did. You're only responsible for what you do with the truth once you know it. Your dad acknowledged what happened. Your family paid restitution. That's more than most people do when faced with uncomfortable history. Morrison cleared his throat. Actually, that's part why we're here. We wanted you to know the Morrison Family Board voted to establish a scholarship program. Full ride to any North Carolina university for descendants of families affected by historical mining operations. We've identified 12 families so far, including yours. Sarah will have access to free college education when she's ready. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. That's incredibly generous. It's justice, Margaret said firmly. Delayed, but still justice. They stayed for another hour. Hannah asked more questions, took photos of the cabin with her phone, scribbled notes for her project. Margaret sat in a rocking chair and told stories about growing up as a Morrison, about the family secrets everyone knew but no one spoke about. There was always guilt, she said, buried deep, hidden under success and respectability. But it was there. We knew the fortune wasn't entirely clean. Your great-great-great-grandfather isn't the only one my grandfather wronged. There were others, other deals that weren't quite ethical. The gold was just the biggest theft. When they left, Morrison shook Maya's hand. Thank you for letting us visit, for showing Hannah the truth. She needs to understand where she comes from, all of it, not just a sanitized version. We all do, Maya said. After they drove away, Chin appeared beside her. That was unexpected. Good unexpected, I think. The girl was genuinely interested, genuinely sorry. The next generation gets to be different. That's the point of all this, right? Break the cycle. Sarah ran up, breathless and covered in cake frosting. Mama, Emma's mom says they have to leave soon. Can we do presents now? Absolutely. The presents were modest but thoughtful. Books about mountains, a junior geologist kit, art supplies. Sarah opened each one with genuine delight, thanking her friend for the manners Maya had carefully taught her. The last present was from Chun. She handed Sarah a flat package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a framed photograph, old, sepia-toned, carefully restored. It showed a young woman in a dark dress standing in front of the cabin. The woman's face was serious but kind, her eyes looking directly at the camera with quiet strength. That's the original Sarah, Chin explained. Ezra's wife. Your great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. I found it in the historical archives at NC State. I thought you should have it. Sarah stared at the photograph with wide eyes. She looks like Mama. Maya looked closer. She'd never seen a picture of the original Sarah before. But her daughter was right. There was a resemblance. The shape of the eyes, the set of the jaw, genetics carrying forward across 5 generations. She does look like me, Maya said softly. And she looks like you, too, baby. We're all connected. That night, after the party ended and the last cars drove away, Maya and Sarah sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the ridges. Sarah was exhausted but happy, clutching her new books and a framed photograph. Mama, Miss Chin said this cabin saved your life. Is that true? Maya thought about how to answer. In a way, yes. When I inherited it, I had nowhere else to go. The cabin gave me shelter. But more than that, it gave me purpose. Fighting for it, learning its history, making sure the truth came out. That gave me a reason to be strong when I wanted to give up. Because of me, because of you. You were the most important reason. But also because of Ezra and the original Sarah and everyone who came before us. I couldn't let their story end in silence. I had to make sure people knew what happened. Sarah leaned against her mother's side. I'm glad you found the cabin. I'm glad we live here. Me too, sweet girl. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness gathered. The mountains held their peace, the way they always had. Somewhere in those mountains, buried under a rock formation, were the original documents that had changed everything. Maya had left them there, preserved and protected, a time capsule for future generations. Someday, when Sarah was grown, Maya would show her where they were hidden, would pass on the responsibility of protecting the truth, would make sure her daughter understood. This land, this cabin, this story, they belonged to the Hartwells forever, but not just as property, as legacy, as proof that fighting for justice mattered, that truth couldn't be buried forever, that courage could overcome impossible odds. The stars began to emerge, brilliant against the darkening sky. Sarah's breathing slowed as she dozed against Maya's shoulder, exhausted from her birthday's celebration. Maya looked down at her daughter and felt overwhelming gratitude. 6 years ago, she'd been sleeping in a car, 7 months pregnant, with $247 to her name and no hope for future. She'd inherited a cabin she didn't want, in mountains she'd never seen, from an ancestor she'd never known. That inheritance had saved her, not the land or the building, but what they represented. Proof that standing up for yourself mattered. That truth could defeat power. That women who seemed broken could be the strongest people in the world. She carried Sarah inside, tucked her into bed, the same bed Ezra had built, now with a proper mattress and warm quilts. She hung the photograph of the original Sarah on the wall, where her daughter could see it every morning. Then Maya returned to the porch and pulled out her phone. She had signal here now. A cell tower had finally been built close enough to reach the mountain. She opened her email and found a message from a woman named Jennifer. Miss Hartwell, I found your emergency trust through a domestic violence shelter in Asheville. I'm 6 months pregnant. My husband is in jail for assault, and I have nowhere to go. The shelter is full. I'm living in my car. Your fund gave me a hotel room for 3 nights. But I don't know what comes next. I'm scared. I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this alone. Can you tell me, how did you do it? How did you survive? Maya read the message twice, then typed a response. Jennifer, you're already doing it. You left. You're protecting your baby. You're asking for help. That's strength. Here's what I learned. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You don't have to know what comes next month or next year. You just have to survive today. And then tomorrow. And then the day after that. One day at a time, one step at a time. The trust can help you with immediate needs. Shelter, food, prenatal care. But the real work is believing you deserve better than what you had. Believing your baby deserves a mother who's safe and whole. You're strong enough. I promise you are. The fact that you're reaching out proves it. If you need to talk, call me. She added her phone number and hit send. Then she sat in the darkness, listening to the mountain silence, and waited, because she knew Jennifer would call. They always did. The women who'd lost everything, who were rebuilding from nothing, who needed someone to tell them they weren't alone. Maya had been that woman once. Now she was the person who answered the phone, who said you're strong enough, who proved by her own existence that impossible situations could be survived. The cabin had given her that. Ezra's courage in documenting the truth. The original Sarah's strength that had somehow carried down through generations. The mountains themselves had held space for women who needed refuge. This was the real inheritance. Not $18 million or 42 acres of protected land, but the knowledge that women could fight and win, that truth mattered, that justice was possible even when it seemed impossible. Her phone rang. Jennifer, crying, scared, asking questions about how to survive the next week. Maya talked her through it, the way Sarah Chun had talked her through her first days in the cabin, the way Vernon had helped her understand legal documents, the way 100 small kindnesses from strangers had added up to survival. When they hung up, Maya sent Jennifer information for the trust fund, for shelters, for programs that could help. Then she added, the cabin is available if you need it. 2 weeks, completely private, in the mountains where no one can find you. Just you and your baby in silence. It helps. I promise it helps. She didn't know if Jennifer would accept. Some women needed the wilderness refuge. Others needed cities and crowds and the safety of anonymity. But the offer stood the way it stood for every woman who needed it. The cabin was still doing what Ezra had intended when he built it, providing sanctuary, just not in the way he'd imagined. Maya went inside, banked a fire, checked on Sarah one last time. Her daughter slept peacefully, the photograph of her namesake watching over her from the wall. 5 generations of Hartwell women, connected by courage and stubbornness, and the refusal to accept that injustice was permanent. Tomorrow, Maya would wake up and make breakfast. She'd drive Sarah to school in Boone. She'd work on trust fund administration, answering emails from women in crisis. She'd live the ordinary life that had seemed impossible 6 years ago. But tonight, she stood in a cabin that had waited 139 years for her family to come home, and she felt peace. The kind of peace that comes from fighting and winning, from standing up when everyone says to stay down, from taking an inheritance of pain and grief and anger and transforming it into justice and hope and refuge. The mountains held their darkness close. The cabin stood solid and warm. And somewhere in the attic, the space where everything had changed, dust motes drifted through air that remembered secrets finally spoken aloud. This was home. This was legacy. This was what it meant to be a Hartwell. Strong enough to survive, brave enough to fight, stubborn enough to win, and generous enough to help the next woman who needed saving. Maya smiled and went to bed.